Hello and welcome back to another spooky video. Today I have chosen, if you could not tell, Reggie Rocket for my look, although it is a bit of a modified Reggie Rocket. The hair is very mullet chic and I am freezing, so I grabbed a pink sweater. You can clearly see the pink shirt I was gonna wear. It is looking a little bit strange, but that's okay. On brand. I thought it would be fun to share some of my favorite horror films of all time today. I did try to avoid selecting too many franchisee obvious films, but a few crept their way in. We have quite a bit to get to, so I'm just gonna jump right into it.
Get out! Get out! Get out of my head! Get out!
Kicking off this countdown is the long-awaited sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep. Set decades after the traumatic events at the Overlook Hotel, we follow an adult Danny Torrance, played by Ewan McGregor, as he struggles with his past demons and his psychic powers. Danny's life takes a dark turn when he meets Abra, a young girl with powerful psychic abilities, who is being hunted by a sinister cult known as the True Knot. Mike Flanagan, the director of this film, did something so impressive. He bridged that gap between Kubrick's The Shining and Stephen King's original vision. Stanley Kubrick, The Shining fans, don't come at me with pitchforks. Stephen King himself said something along the lines of the film was like a beautiful car, but with no engine. Jack being a bit batshit crazy from the get kind of ruins the entire vision of The Shining, at least in Stephen King's eyes. So while The Shining was visually stunning, the heart of the story was missing. Mike Flanagan managed to craft a sequel that honors both Kubrick's movie and King's book, which is no small feat. That cannot be overstated. Hello, editing me here. I'm just gonna butt in for a second. I have re-edited this video probably, not exaggerating, 15 times because YouTube hates me. And unfortunately, I had to use stills instead of moving videos, moving clips from these films for quite a few of the films. So I apologize. I usually like to do straight clips, but yeah, YouTube said, no bueno, we're not gonna do that. So I apologize in advance if you have to look at pictures instead of moving pictures. That's all. I went into this movie thinking it would be psychological horror, not a lot of gore, not a lot of intensity, not super scary. Oh, how wrong I was. Oh my god, that scene with the little kid that goes on for far too long. Apparently Flanagan had a longer version of it, and when he sent the film to Stephen King to check out before he, made the final call, Stephen King's like, yeah, that scene kind of goes on a long time, doesn't it? And Mike Flanagan cut it down. This is his cut down version of that scene. It is so crazy, and the only way I can explain it, which probably makes no sense, is I feel everything, all of the emotion, the atmosphere, the entire energy of the film sinking into my pores, and it made it very effective and very scary.
You've got them hid, but you'd better get them and bring them back here. Right, hit 'em, man!
Number 19 is The Bad Seed. The film centers around Rhoda, a seemingly perfect little girl with blonde pigtails and impeccable manners. Basically the kind of kid you'd expect to see in a cereal commercial. But underneath that sweet exterior, there's something seriously wrong. When a classmate of hers mysteriously drowns, her mom, Christine, starts piecing together some pretty disturbing clues that make her wonder if her darling daughter isn't so innocent after all. The suspense builds as Christine grapples with the horrifying possibility that her own child might be capable of terrible, terrible things. And the actress that plays young Rhoda, I believe she played her in the stage or Broadway portrayal of The Bad Seed, if I'm not mistaken. It is very apparent that she knows this character inside and out. This is one of the best acting performances I've seen in a horror film ever. Not just for a child, for an actor in general. She is so good.
Oh, why don't you go find a wall socket and stick your tongue in it? That'll give you a charge.
I'll stick my tongue up your pretty putt.
You f***ing creep.
I'm going to kill you.
Next on the list is a film that I feel like flies under the radar, but it's a true gem for any slasher enthusiast, and I know what you're gonna think when I say the name, that it's not very Halloween-y, but it is, I promise. It's Black Christmas. During the holiday season, a quiet sorority house becomes the scene of unsettling terror as the residents start receiving threatening phone calls. What begins as a nuisance soon spirals into something far more sinister, as the unknown caller's intentions become deadly. This 1974 classic is a perfect slow burn horror film. It's also one of the earliest examples of a slasher film, predating even Halloween.
Those things is dangerous. You're liable to get hurt. We'll be careful. You don't want to go fooling around other folks' property. Some folks don't like it, and they don't mind showing you.
Next is a quadruple feature. I'm really just pushing my luck here, aren't I? But it falls under the same umbrella, the same franchise. I'm talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's the original, there's the remake, there is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and then there is the newest Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Starting with the OG film, it is so gritty and grimy and sweaty. I didn't even give you a summary yet, I just assumed you knew, which is very rude of me. It follows a group of friends who, while on a road trip, I think they went because someone's family member's gravestone was messed up or could have been messed up, something like that. But along the way, they stumble upon a rural family of cannibals, including the iconic Leatherface. While watching, you can just see how miserable filming was. It was excruciatingly hot at the time, and you can see that in their eyes. And I say that in the most artistic way. I think it's a positive. The brilliance of Texas Chainsaw lies in what it doesn't show, and I found that this is quite common with a lot of earlier slashers. Not all of them, some are incredibly gory, but despite its reputation, Texas Chainsaw is not an overly gory film, but the way it's shot makes you feel like you've seen something far more brutal than what's actually on screen. My mind immediately goes to the hook scene. You think you see that hook piercing her skin. You do not. I don't even think in the much more intense remake that they show that hook scene. If I'm not mistaken, it's a shot from his face to the hook and then his face again. Getting back to the original Texas Chainsaw before I go too far down that rabbit hole, when you're watching the film, you feel trapped and helpless, much like the characters. Leatherface is terrifying, not just because of his brutality, but because of how unpredictable and primal he is. Moving on to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, this is quite a departure from the original. This time, the story follows a radio DJ and former Texas Ranger as they get caught up in Leatherface's deranged family again. But the tone is so much more eccentric and offbeat. Where the first film was gritty and terrifying, this one is campy, loud, and full of twisted comedy, which is a very bold move, but in my opinion, it makes for a really interesting sequel. That opening scene, the sliding off slice of the head, the glasses, the car phone, the Oingo Boingo playing, I believe it's Oingo Boingo playing. It's so unapologetically 80s. The reason this film is a classic must-watch for me is the chainsaw duel. Yes, you heard that correctly. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 did not try to recreate the first film's magic, but instead does its own thing, embracing the madness and delivering a totally different yet equally wild horror experience. The third film in this quadruple feature is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003, which takes the gross, gritty horror of the original, clearly gritty is my favorite word today, and amplifies it with a modern edge, making it a surprisingly solid reimagining. This was one of the first horror films I ever watched, and I just remember thinking how disgusting it was. Everything about it felt grimy and weird. There's There's a dude with limbs being cut off and having what I presume was salt rubbed into the open wound, and that gross little man grabbing on the girl's butt. Ew. And finally, we have the latest Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, which was released on Netflix in 2022 and brought Leatherface into the modern era. It takes place 50 years after Leatherface's 1973 attacks. A group of young entrepreneurs go to the ghost town of Harlow, Texas, with big plans to revitalize it. What they don't realize is that their arrival stirs Leatherface right back up to torment them. I know this film is incredibly divisive. I happen to really love it. I in no way claim to have the best taste in movies. It's just my personal opinion, but I loved how it tied back to the original film, bringing Sally back. Very Halloween Final Girl Returns plot. Loved that. I do wish she had a bigger part in the film, but that's all right. It was still a very fun movie, fun kills. It's definitely got a sleeker, more modern look. Obviously, it's from 2022. It still keeps that chaotic, terrifying energy, though. And this one, it is gory. This one, yeah, that bus scene, man. I would say that's up there with the chainsaw duel in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 when it comes to iconic scenes in the franchise.
Keep going, please. Go.
Open the...
What's happening?
Cecilia, open the door!
Number 16 is the 2020 remake of The Invisible Man. In the newest Invisible Man, a woman named Cecilia Cass escapes from an abusive relationship with a wealthy, controlling scientist. Shortly after her escape, she learns that her ex has taken his own life, leaving her a significant portion of his fortune. But Cecilia soon suspects his death was a hoax when she begins experiencing a series of terrifying, inexplicable events. As she tries to prove that she is being stalked by someone that no one can see, her sanity is questioned by those around her. Lee Winnell directed this, and he really is something special. That restaurant scene, I don't think I've seen anything that executes the idea of catch them off guard with a scare more than this restaurant scene in The Invisible Man. You can't even process what's happening before the horror sinks in. It's just so fast and feels so real. And it adds to that whole overarching anxiety of, how am I supposed to explain this? How can I get them to believe me? I'm sure the majority of people have felt this way in their lives, so I'm not just singling out women. That being said, I do believe, and I could be way off, that the viewing experience for this film is much different for a woman than it is for a man. Again, don't get sensitive about it. I could be wrong. It could not apply to you. You could think I'm exactly right or think I'm completely stupid. That's okay. Personally, I felt like this film was incredibly emotional. I felt ironically seen and heard in this film, because that's the whole fear, is not feeling seen or heard or believed. It's such a shame, man, too, because this film, I think, is so overlooked and was so overlooked because the big bad hit. And I want to say, like, 3 to 4 weeks after, at least in Florida, if you can believe it, was when lockdown started. Maybe not the full 100% with curfews yet, but definitely was to an extent that affected moviegoing. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm sure it did well. I just think that it should have been talked about so much more. It should continue to be talked about because it's one of the greatest horror films of this decade so far.
What did you put in the oath?
Anti-freeze?
You are so fucking scared. I can see your house from up here.
Number 15 is something a bit more chilly, and it is another winter Christmassy horror film. I didn't even realize that when I was making my list. It's Jack Frost. This 1997 film is a fabulous example of horror comedy absurdity done right. Featuring a serial killer who, after a bizarre accident, is transformed into a murderous snowman. Yes, a corncob pipe and a button nose to eyes made out of coal snowman. Oh yes. It's as ridiculous as it sounds, and that's what makes it so much fun. It's got everything you could want: cheesy one-liners, over-the-top kills, and pure audacity. Despite its low budget and campy premise, Jack Frost has gained a cult following, with me as their leader.
Aside and let me go. Stop. Stop it. Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
Number 14, another back-to-back, Creep 1 and Creep 2. The first Creep film is about a videographer who takes a job in a remote mountain town to film a dying man's last messages, that dying man being Joseph. As the day progresses, Joseph starts peeling back the layers of his ticky boom boom situation, which understandably freaks Aaron out. Now we follow Sarah, a video artist who creates a web series about odd and lonely people, when she comes across an ad placed by our guy Joseph, who is now using the name Aaron, and Joseph/Aaron is claiming to be a serial killer looking for someone to document his confession. Now Sarah sees this and is like, oh, perfect, let's go right now. Because Sarah is a clout goblin, and the moral of this story is to not be a clout goblin. This film shows the consequences of such behavior. Joseph/Aaron, if you can believe it, exhibits some bizarre behavior, and Sarah finds herself in some uncomfortable and or disturbing situations. This is such a good sequel because we really get into the crevices of Joseph's disturbed psyche. And the best part about both of these films is, yes, they are absolutely terrifying, but they are also equally as hilarious. Carrie follows Carrie White, a quiet, socially awkward girl raised by an oppressive religious mother who discovers she has telekinetic abilities. So there is that supernatural element, but it also taps into the very real horrors of adolescence and being an outsider. The prom scene is unforgettable. It's one of the most intense and well-crafted moments in horror history. Sissy Spacek's performance adds magic to Carrie White, making her just as tragic as she is terrifying. I didn't grow up in any sort of religious way. Neither of my parents actively practice any religion, so it really wasn't a part of my life, but I still very much connected to Carrie when I first watched this film. I still do. And that's the beauty of the film to me. Carrie is universal. Her feelings are relatable for anyone. You could be the polar opposite of her. A grown man who doesn't have any religious ties, who has a healthy relationship with his mom. And I believe that even he could identify with Carrie at some point during the movie. And leaving on this note, Sissy Spacek deserves an Oscar for this role, but really it's her eyes that deserve the Oscar. Wow. That's the image when I think of Carrie. The eyes during that car flip scene with her face all covered in blood. I probably made that the intro for this section. Oh, it's so good.
Ophelia, call the police.
Sure, playing the Police by NWA.
Number 12 is Jordan Peele's Us, and let me start by saying I love all of Jordan Peele's films. I think Jordan Peele is a genius. I admire him on so many different levels. His horror films are like apples, oranges, and bananas to me. I love each and every one of them, but they're very, very different. So I have a very hard time ranking them in order of favorites. They're like children, and I can't make every single one of these a double, triple feature, obviously. So instead of picking my favorite one, I said to myself, what would be the Jordan Peele film that you would recommend to someone to throw on around Halloween to get them in the spoopy mood? And when I asked myself that question, Us was the immediate answer. Us follows a family on a beach vacation, specifically where the protagonist Adelaide went as a child in Santa Cruz. Here, they are confronted by their eerie doppelgangers, which leads to a terrifying, nutso, suspenseful battle for survival. It's got a killer soundtrack, incredible, brilliant symbolism. It looks fantastic. In my opinion, it feels like the most classic horror film in his catalog. It's got great humor, too. I mean, would expect nothing less from Jordan Peele. All around, a really great, fun watch. Highly recommend if you have not seen it. And if you have already seen it, I highly recommend a rewatch. I notice something different, something new every time I rewatch Us, and I have rewatched Us several times. Number 11 is Creature from the Black Lagoon. This is a fantastic example of classic monster horror that's still influential today. The film follows a group of scientists exploring the Amazon who stumble upon a strange humanoid creature living in the depths of the lagoon. Now, obviously, the star of Creature from the Black Lagoon is the creature, right? And the design, I can't stress how influential the design of this creature is. To this day, it's outstanding work. The underwater scenes are probably the most standout of the entire film. They are beautifully shot, especially for the time, and it creates this otherworldly atmosphere that really sets the tone. The Gill Man, as he's called, is more than just a monster. There's a tragic element to his isolation, which makes the story feel deeper than your typical creature feature. The visual storytelling, the creature itself, the adventure in the film, all of this gives Creature from the Black Lagoon a timeless appeal.
Go, 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 go! Go, 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 go! Go, 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 go!
Starting off the top 10 is Jeepers Creepers. The movie follows siblings Trish and Derry as they embark on a road trip through rural America. When will these people ever learn? Along the way, they encounter a menacing man/creature situation known as the Creeper, a supernatural being that awakens every 23 years to feed on human body parts. After witnessing the creeper disposing a body, the siblings find themselves relentlessly pursued by it. This was the first time I had ever really noticed sound in a horror film. The impact sound of that truck hitting the car was crazy, and that horn, ugh, that was so bad. And again, this was one of the very first horror films I had ever seen, so the protagonist being a wicked dumbass trope was brand new to me. I couldn't understand why this man was so insistent on not minding his own business. Why? Why do you need to go look down this tunnel situation? You very clearly saw this psycho drop bodies into this tunnel. Why aren't you taking off in the opposite direction? Little me had no idea.
Desire, ambition, faith. Without them, life's so simple, believe me.
I don't want any part of it.
You're forgetting something, Miles.
What's that?
You have no choice.
Number 9 is the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978. My first reaction after watching this film was, oh, this is like a perfect film. This is what that looks like. It nails everything from concept to execution. It's got this brilliant blend of sci-fi and psychological horror, with the whole idea of people being replaced by emotionless copies hitting on some really deep fears about losing your identity. The pacing is spot on, building tension and paranoia as you start to question who's still human in this film. I think the black and white adds an eerie, stark contrast that makes the small town setting feel both familiar and alien at the same time. What makes this film absolutely brilliant to me, and it's important that you know I'm a real big fan of fantastic symbolism. I love a good metaphor. I love great themes. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers taps into Cold War anxieties about conformity and control. So it's not just a suspenseful thriller, but an intelligent commentary on its time. I'm very hype on this film right now. I just watched it yesterday to take notes for my Evolution of Horror film series. The 40s and 50s is coming out soon. It's coming out next, but I work on several things at once. So working on the 70s and 80s for me has been so much fun, as you can probably tell by this list, but let me trudge forward instead of getting too caught up in that. If you're interested in seeing the first video in that series that I have done, I will post it here and in the bio and at the end of the video. For number 8, I've got another double feature with Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead Rise. Evil Dead 2 is interesting because it's like a complicated sequel, requel. Bruce Campbell explains it best.
We couldn't get the rights to our own movie, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. So we just shot a recap with different actors as though that was the recap. But people thought, what's with all, he's coming back to the same cabin with these new people? What? So there's a big debate of is Evil Dead 2 a remake or a sequel? It's a requel. You know, it's whatever you want to call it. So if you really want to do it right, you take the first Evil Dead up to where the evil entity hits me, cut off all the recap, go right into Ash being thrown through the trees at the beginning. It would all make perfect sense.
The story picks up with Ash, played by Bruce Campbell, as he faces off against demonic forces unleashed by the Necronomicon. I apologize, my tongue gets jammed up saying that, so I'm probably not pronouncing it right. But you know what I'm talking about. Evil Dead 2 is so special. It walks that fine line between terrifying and hilarious really, really well. As you can tell or will be able to tell, I very much enjoy horror comedy. And I feel like Evil Dead 2 probably has done it the best out of any horror film ever. Like, just as they begin to ramp up the horror, the terror, that's when the film throws in a moment of slapstick absurdity, keeping you constantly on your toes. Just when you think you're about to scream and look away, you end up laughing. It's a roller coaster. Sam Raimi's direction is brilliantly chaotic. I feel like chaos is another word I'm throwing around a lot. I guess I like chaotic horror films as well. He uses really creative camera work and practical effects to give the film a manic energy. The cabin itself feels like a character with objects coming to life in eerie, surreal ways. And of course, Bruce Campbell's performance as Ash is beyond iconic. He brings so much physicality to the role, whether he's battling possessed furniture or delivering one-liners with perfect timing. He's incredible, Sam Raimi's incredible, the film is so much fun and fast-paced and just as much about the experience of watching as it is about the scares. The second feature in this double feature is Evil Dead Rise, the most recent entry in the franchise. And it did not disappoint me. I had very, very high expectations. I love that this film goes polar opposite with the setting, going from woods to city, where a family discovers the Necronomicon in their apartment building. Once the evil is unleashed, all hell breaks loose. It's fast, gory, action-packed, and terrifying. It's a really fun watch. Number 7 is Eyes Without a Face, a haunting, poetic blend of horror and tragedy. The film follows a brilliant but disturbed surgeon who, after his daughter Christiane's face is disfigured in a car accident, becomes obsessed with restoring her beauty by any means necessary. There's so much elegance in this film, and it makes it even more unsettling without relying on gore. Well, too much gore. Don't let the beauty or the fact that it was made in 1960, I believe, fool you. It does have a scene that is one of the craziest I have ever seen in a horror film. I don't look away often at all when it comes to horror films, but I don't know, something about this scene, maybe because I wasn't expecting it, and it feels so real when it's happening. You'll know the scene when you see it, or you know the scene already if you've already seen this film. It hits hard. The daughter Christiane wears the most horrifying fucking nothingness mask that is absolutely expressionless. This mask actually inspired the Michael Myers mask, so shout out there. Unlike Michael Myers, this mask makes Christiane look ghostly and tragic. There's a lot of melancholy there in the whole film, really, just this sadness that underpins the horror, which makes it feel more emotional and layered than your typical horror movie. It's a quiet, almost lyrical approach to horror, and it makes the hairs on the back of your neck practically jump out of the skin.
I tell you what, Ski King, why don't you just take your mama home some chicken, and then I won't have to stuff my boot all up in your ass.
Next is a classic film to watch to get you in the spoopy mood, House of a Thousand Corpses. A group of young people, including Dwight Fishboy Schrute canonically, are on a road trip researching bizarre roadside attractions. During this adventure, they stumble upon the twisted Firefly family, who lure the friends into their Firefly nightmare world filled with violence and pure grade A batshit craziness. The bad guys are the worst of the worst. It's a mixed bag of all the best horror villains, done in a way only Rob Zombie could fathom. You've got the deranged doctor, the serial killers, even the evil clown. It's meant to be campy and funny, whilst also making you vomit up the bag of candy corn you mauled earlier in the day. It's depraved, sadistic, hilarious, bizarre, and if you let go of all preconceived notions of what your typical horror film is, and just let yourself melt into Rob Zombie's experience, I think you'll enjoy the film much more. Getting into our top 5, we have the 700th double feature, Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2. Terrifier is a relentless, no-frill slasher that absolutely revels in its brutality. And I love that. Art the Clown is hands down one of the most terrifying modern horror villains, and really the only Mount Rushmore horror icon since, Jigsaw? And what I mean by that is, like Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, who else has really been up there with those villains? Which ones can stand the test of time? I guess we'll just have to see with Art the Clown, but I have a good feeling he will be up there. Art is unpredictable, sadistic, and completely void of any humanity. The first film doesn't waste time on complex plot lines or deep backstories. It's all about pure, unfiltered terror. The practical effects are... my jaw dropped. They are so brutal, but so impressive, even if you were a bit gore shy. If you're a lot gore shy, this won't apply. But if you are a little gore shy, you won't look away. You can't look away. You're just so taken in by it. You're like, what the fuck am I looking at right now? What is happening? Terrifier feels like a throwback to the nastiest slashers of the 80s, like I mentioned with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those gritty, raw films. I thought this first film was so wild, I couldn't even fathom what the sequel would look like. But here we are jumping into the second of this double feature, Terrifier 2, which completely ups the ante and just goes all out, taking everything that made the first film great and pushing it even further. The gore is even more intense, the stakes feel higher, and there's this crazy, surreal atmosphere that makes it feel like a 2-hour long nightmare. What is it, 2.5 hours? I don't know. A very long nightmare. Art the Clown is somehow even more menacing, all while maintaining being a humongous goofball. The sequel introduces a deeper, almost mythic battle between good and evil, which gives it more weight. The practical effects, again, something I didn't know they could up the ante on, but they did it. And the gore. Did I even mention the gore yet? If you thought the gore was crazy in the original, no. Terrifier 2 is buck wild. It feels like a celebration of everything that makes extreme horror fun. It's bigger, bloodier, and way more ambitious, while still delivering that raw, visceral terror.
I am not an elephant! I am not an animal! I am a human being!
Number 4 is another double feature and would probably be thrown into the miscellaneous subgenre of horror. They are Elephant Man and Eraserhead, both from the genius mind of David Lynch. Some of you may be very confused and think this is a very odd duo to throw into the horror film mix. Some of you may not believe that these films are horror at all, which I very much disagree with, but I get it. If you have not seen these films and you are open to checking them out, just don't go into them expecting blood and guts and knives and ghosts. They're not that kind of horror film. David Lynch created a deeply, deeply unsettling atmosphere with these films, and that for me is the foundation of what makes them so horrific. There's a lot of other shit that goes into both of them, but that's like the core element for me. Starting with The Elephant Man, this is one of my favorite films of all time. It is so beautiful. It tells the tragic and true story of Joseph Merrick, a severely disfigured man living in Victorian England. Merrick, cruelly named the Elephant Man due to his physical deformities, is rescued from a life of exploitation in a freak show by a doctor who provides him with care and dignity. As Merrick's humanity is revealed, the film explores themes of compassion, the human spirit, and cruelty of society's judgment. Now on to Eraserhead. Eraserhead is more of an avant-garde horror film that launches you into the surreal world of Henry Spencer, a man living in a bleak industrial landscape. The story and Henry's life take a terrifying turn when his girlfriend Mary gives birth to a deformed, non-human, alien-esque baby. Eraserhead is pure nightmare fuel, and it's basically Henry's descent into madness. The film's distinguishing visuals and unsettling sound design creates a pervasive sense of anxiety and dread and weirdness. I don't know what the opposite of butterflies are, but if you know, you know. I feel like Eraserhead just evokes that feeling in your stomach. I am not selling this movie very well with that explanation, but if you want a bizarrely emotional film experience that triggers the specific anxiety of what the f*** is my life right now, that existential crisis dread, Eraserhead is for you. This is, and I am very confident when I say this, the weirdest film you will ever watch. The only film that could hold a weird little candle to this one is The Lighthouse, perhaps. Eraserhead either completely captures you and consumes you, or it completely repels you. Either way, it stays with you for life. It is a masterclass in surreal, acid trip, nightmare fuel psychological horror.
The lousy bastard was in there killing her! Bastard! Bastard! Bastard!
Number 3 is a cult classic masterpiece. It is simultaneously the worst and best horror film to ever be made. Well, third best ever, but you get what I'm saying. It's the 1982 slasher Pieces. Pieces is a wild ride through the grindhouse era of horror. It's a film that embraces its own absurdity while delivering on every bloody promise a slasher enthusiast could hope for. The story takes us to a college campus where a mysterious killer is assembling a human jigsaw puzzle. It's a mix of over-the-top gore, a pinch of nonsensical plot twists, a heavy cup of exploitation, and it's cooked up to be pure 80s slasher madness.
I'm a security guard. I kill people every fucking day. Let's fucking go.
Dewey, where is he? Where is he? Tell Daddy where he is, Dewey.
And the runner-up is Thanksgiving, a blood-soaked letter to us massholes, capturing the spirit of small-town Americana vibes with a gruesome twist. Eli Roth, who has been talking about and teasing a Thanksgiving horror film forever, takes the classic holiday slasher trope and makes it feel distinctly New England during the Thanksgiving season, except here, the turkey isn't the only thing getting carved. Sometimes I can be funny, and sometimes I am not. The plot centers around Plymouth, Massachusetts, when a series of murders take place. It's a huge nod to the 1980s, the golden age of slashers.
Oh, pizza.
And finally, taking the top spot on this countdown is none other than Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Killer Clowns is one of those horror comedy gems that captures the weird, wonderful, kooky, and charming vibe of the 80s. I'm a huge fan of 80s horror, if you could not tell. Killer Clowns from Outer Space is pure, campy horror fun that doesn't take itself seriously for a second. And that's exactly what makes it so great. The plot is exactly what it sounds like. Alien clowns come to Earth to wreak havoc on a small town and turn locals into cotton candy pod things. It's so absurd and so magical and whimsical and fantabulous. I haven't said that word since like grade 7. The film embraces its over-the-top premise with creative, hilarious kills, and clown designs that are both creepy and cartoonish, sort of like the animatronics at Chuck E. Cheese, you know? They're colorful, have crazy, exaggerated features, which make them look innocently terrifying. They wield cotton candy and popcorn guns and pies. You can't forget pies when you're a killer clown. Beware of the pies. I picked this for number 1 because at its core, this film is all about having a blast. It is campy brilliance, and I think it would be perfect to have on in the background at a Halloween party, or to throw on while you pregame, or to watch alone while you eat popcorn and cotton candy with your cats. Despite its absurd premise, Killer Clowns has endured over the years and developed a very passionate, kooky fan base for sure. So there you have it, some of my favorite horror films at the moment. I have so many favorites, it's so hard to choose. I'm already thinking of ones I've forgotten, like Midsommar, The Thing, Audition, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Freaks, The Witch. I would struggle giving you a list of even my top 100 horror films. I hope one of these films piqued your interest, maybe a new watch, or maybe makes you want to give one a rewatch. Either way, I hope you have a fun and safe Halloween. Plan your designated driver, use the buddy system. I don't care if you're 57 or 15. And if you're like me and plan on wearing your costume inside while having a Friday the 13th marathon with a bag of candy, have your Pepto-Bismol ready.